Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Hey, good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone. We've got a great treat for you this week on Muskogee Vision. We bring to you from the early 90s, the Humanities Council and the Arts Council of Oklahoma got together and had a Native American Master Artist video series. This is a selection of that series, and it focuses on Creek Cherokee shell worker Ngofti Scott. This is an incredible piece of video that you're not going to find anywhere else out there but right here on Muskogee Vision. And we're so glad to be able to provide you from this series from inside the vault today here on the show.
This program was funded in part by the Oklahoma Foundation for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities, and was made possible with the assistance of the State Arts Council of Oklahoma and the National Endowment for the Arts.
I was taught that if something good exists, it never dies. It's always there, and it just needs to be, I guess, stumbled upon again or rewoken. But it's never ceased to exist. It's still there. And this is what I feel about the shell work, is that it's never really ceased. It's always been there. And maybe this was one way that the old Indian people felt that they could communicate with us here in the future. And here the Indian people have been doing this for the last 2,000 years, so now it's kind of come full turn, and everybody's starting to look at these things again and realizing the design importance and the impact that it has. Even though they are very, very old, they've never lost their vitality or their freshness. They have so much strength and so much power to them that sometimes in the art world, you want to incorporate that into your work somehow to give that strength, to capture that. And so that's what I've been trying to do, is to continue that on and to capture that strength and vitality. And maybe if other people can see this, they can feel it too.
For thousands of years, Indian people in Oklahoma have used rivers for journeys, trade, and exploration. Now, a Creek Cherokee artist, Ngofti Scott, comes to the Verdigris River as part of his journey back to the traditions of his people.
Now, I prefer to go and look for my own materials, my purple shells. The purple mussel shells are very rare and they're hard to find, so I like to go out and look. It's like when I can find one of them, it's a rare treat. So this is sort of like a gift from nature that I'm looking for, and then when I can find it and take it back and use it and make something out of it and add a little bit of something to the beauty of it, then make it into something that somebody else can appreciate, and it feels like fruit. From the beginning to the end, that whole process is very important to me.
Ngofti's small studio is on family land in the Cherokee Nation. He uses modern tools to create shell jewelry inspired by his ancestors. By careful planning, he uses as much of each shell as possible.
Once I've gotten the shell to the shop, I'll look at it very closely and look for the things I can bring out in the shell as I cut it. The first step is to mark out the different parts that I want to cut out. And so I'll just pencil this on in straight lines. This will be the path that I follow for my trim cuts. And these different sections of the shell will be used for different parts of my jewelry. This outer edge, the thicker lip part, will be used for the beads. The center part here will be used for the gorgets. And this lower end will be used for the crescents and also for earrings. Some parts of the shell sometimes has imperfections in it. These are blister pearls, and I'll try to save this part and incorporate it into some form of jewelry later. I also cut out the hinge area here for earrings, and I'll save all this part here for later for beads and other things I can make from the shell. The next process, the next step, is to go ahead and trim out the shell.
Like a painter who has stretched and prepared a canvas, the Gofty now has a surface ready for a design. Ironically, his desire to know about Creek Cherokee designs came from learning a different jewelry tradition.
In 1972, I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And while I was out there, I began to study jewelry making and silversmithing. At that time, turquoise was sweeping the nation. It was the biggest fad in the Indian market. And a lot of Indian people were earning their living through silversmithing and cutting turquoise and making southwestern Indian jewelry. So while I was there, I started studying Hopi inlay and overlay, and also Navajo tufa casting, turquoise cutting. And so I learned all these southwestern Indian jewelry processes. And while I was doing this, this led me to become very curious about what type of jewelry that the Cherokees and the Creeks made. That led me on back when I returned to Oklahoma to study into the jewelry forms of the southeastern Indians. And so from that, it led me to the study of our ancient designs. And when I started realizing how our ancient designs looked very contemporary also, that led me more into wanting to try my hand at making something in the line of traditional Cherokee and Creek jewelry. When I first started looking into the design motifs and the ancient motifs, they were very mysterious to me because I didn't understand what they represented or what they meant. So as I began studying them, I found out more about the traditional past that we have, the southeastern ceremonial complex culture. And it was very vast, and these were the people who built the mounds throughout the southeast. But as I got to look more and more into it, I could see how the culture covered a great deal of ground. And even over here in Oklahoma, which was the western part of the southeastern culture, that included Spiro area, the Caddoan people. Well, at one time, we all shared the same basic culture, the southeastern ceremonial complex. I looked at Spiro as being part of this whole culture, and there I got a lot of my design work to start because people kept asking me, you know, since we're in this area, to do some Spiro motifs. And especially since it represents this area, and they were the first Oklahomans, so to speak, I began to research that and to draw upon those designs. It's one of the places that has the most fantastic, elaborate shell work that's ever been found anywhere. The greatest concentration of it to be found was found in Craig Mound. And so that's just like a vast storehouse, a treasure house of information. And so I've started to look at it, to research it, and now I've started to do a lot of the spiral designs in my work.
Dr. Don Wyckoff, director of the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey, is an expert on the people who lived in the Spiral Mounds area and the Temple Mounds culture.
Here on the east side of the Spiral Mound occurs the principal burial mound for the leaders of this particular society, called the Craig Mound, and excavated by the WPA in 1936. This particular mound held the remains of over 700 important leaders in that ancient society. Because Spiro is such an important religious center, and because its political religious leaders were able to control trade between the southern plains and the southeast United States, they were also able to accumulate unprecedented quantities of important status goods. In particular, Spiro has yielded the largest quantities of copper artifacts and the most engraved conch shells that we know of for the entire North American continent.
These drawings are based on artifacts found in the burial mounds and show how the elite class of this society may have looked. Chiefs, priests, and warriors expressed their power and status through rich and exotic display. Copper hair ornaments, intricate braiding of hair, ear spools, and face and body painting. Elaborate ceremonies and ritual dancing enabled priests and warriors to take on the attributes of powerful animals and birds of prey. Shell work was an essential part of the ceremonies. Around their necks, participants wore circular pendants called gorgets. Many rituals included the black drink. This strong herbal tea was taken from engraved shell cups.
I like to think of Spiro as comparable to ancient Delphi in Greece. Although it wasn't the largest city, although it didn't have the most spectacular architecture, Delphi was a place where philosophers, thinkers, and religious people came to share ideas and to learn from one another. And I think that's the way Spiro functioned in prehistoric southeast United States.
The Interpretive Center at Spiro Mound State Park educates visitors about Spiro's role in the network of mound cities that flourished in the southeastern United States 1,000 years ago.
One of the most remarkable developments in prehistoric America occurred around AD 800 when a number of societies became intensive farmers of corn, beans, and squash, and developed some of the most complex societies that we know of for the area north of Mexico. These societies persisted from around AD 800 to AD 1400, and they occupied a vast area of the southeast United States. Each one of the locations shown here was an important ceremonial center, a political center, and also important in a widespread trade network that existed between the southern plains and the southeast United States.
The Mississippi River system connected these cities. Traders in canoes carried shell from the west coast of Florida to Spiro, and carried as well ceremonial objects and customs.
Many artifacts used by the leaders of these societies were of similar styles, and some of them carry motifs and designs that were shared among the many societies throughout the southeast United States. For example, we have here an engraved gorget from Spiro, and these engraved shells are becoming extremely important for archaeologists because there's a lot more study going into the kinds of motifs and designs that are depicted upon This particular engraved shell gorget comes from Spiro and is interesting because it depicts two dancers who are wearing costumes, who have on a distinctive style of headdresses, and who are carrying a shield and rattles. The rattles are interesting because of the designs that they show on them. In the central part of the gorget is depicted a raccoon and also the four wind symbol. Many of the motifs and designs shown on this engraved gorget are similar to those found at sites in Alabama and Tennessee, the traditional homelands of the Creek and the Cherokee Nagofti's ancestors.
The design I'm drawing onto this shell is the whirlwind design. Now, I was always intrigued by this. I know that there's a clan called the Wind Clan among the Creeks, and I just assumed that this design represented that. But as I got more involved into researching and talking to other Indian people about what these motifs meant, I came to find out that this was called the Strength of Life design, and this was told to me by Philip Deer. The strength of life comes from things that you find in nature, like the whirlwind, the tornado, the whirlpool, and it also represents the movement that the Indian people dance around a sacred fire in a spiraling motion.
In midsummer, Creek Indians in eastern Oklahoma still observe the green corn ceremony. These 4 days celebrate the first harvest of corn and the beginning of the new year with dancing, feasting, and fellowship. Although ceremonial shell cups are no longer used, taking herbal medicine is still part of the ritual. This ceremony renews the strength of the tribal community and is a direct link to the culture of the mound builders.
In the center of the ceremonial square, there are the 4 logs. These 4 logs represent the sacred fire that's kept burning continuous from ancient times. On this gorget here, the 4 logs are represented by these motifs circling this inner circle. These 4 logs represent the 4 seasons, also the 4 phases of a person's life. When he's an infant, a child, an adult, and an elder. One of the final steps is to paint in the recessed lines that have been inscribed into the design. This color of red complements the color of the purple shell and brings the design out from the background. Occasionally when I'm trying to get ready for an art show, time just runs out, and so you have to make time. And so usually I just spend that time all night long in the shop trying to get ready for a show, and I've worked at 36 hours straight just preparing for a show, and that just gets you to the point where you're really seeing double and everything. And about the early in the morning, it's hard on your fingers and everything, because that's usually the time you stick them into the grinding wheel or into the buffing wheel. you know that deadline's just right there, coming up real fast. So you're trying to put everything together and you're evaluating what you should do next. So, and hopefully somehow it all just seems to fall together and come together, and then once you're able to get out that door and on the road and then get to the show and then try to act awake and be there to meet people and everything like that. Sometimes it's real hard and people wonder why you're so funny looking or something like that, but you're maybe just dead tired. I'm usually just dead tired, and so my wife or somebody can usually handle the show for me while I go off and take a little nap someplace. Part of the enjoyment that I get out of making it is also to see the person that it eventually might sell to.
I like those beads now that you
Because a piece to me is like almost a child, and I want to see it as it grows and maybe as it's being bought by somebody to where it's going, so I can get to know that person too and find out who appreciates it and why they appreciate it. Well, the smaller things here are 20. The longer hinge rings are 30. Is this a good yellow?
Mr. Scott,
That's good, Crystal. You need to work a little bit on your coloring technique on the inside cross. Cover up the white spaces. I teach elementary Indian art, and so basically I have to teach the fundamentals of art. So I have to teach basic shapes and basic designs, and I use the traditional motifs in doing that, especially the circle, the square, the triangle. Teaching these basic forms to the children and showing them how to put them together into these different motifs. From the bottom of the outer circle, over here, and then around here, and then around here. What this represents is the strength of life movement, okay? It's also the whirlwind symbol that goes around. And then also I can teach them the names of the motifs and what the designs represent. The leader will come out and he'll start out. And so my main curriculum is based on the study of Indian art. And I feel this is so important because most of the little Indian kids there don't really have a background in their own traditional culture. What they know is what they see on TV and through the movies, and it's just like little white kids too. They have a stereotyped view of what the Indian is. They all feel that we lived in teepees and rode horses on the plains and hunted the buffalo. And so I'm trying to teach more about our traditional culture of the southeastern Indian woodland period. It came over like this, and then was attached to it down here, so they had to cut all this out. It's real hard getting your cuts all the way down in there. It's real hard. My definition of Indian art is one that Enoch Kelly Haney gave at a symposium at Northeastern one time. He said, Indian art is that art done of an Indian subject matter by an Indian artist. And I feel like that needs to be carried a little bit further. And that Indian subject matter should be something that pertains to that particular Indian artist, tribal background. Because I want to see the shell work grow because it's the traditional art of the Creeks and the Cherokees. My mother's a Cherokee Indian, and so some of my first earlier pieces were on my Cherokee background. This one's called Cherokee Cross, and on it's written in Cherokee Cholagee. It also has the 4 log symbol on it. This gorget is called Windbirds, and this relates to my dad's people, the Creeks. It represents the 4 warrior birds coming out of the directional cross. This is also a symbol for the Wind Clan, and this bird symbol is also the symbol for my wife's clan. One of the basic designs I used is the 4 log symbol. And I started out just by showing what the 4 logs look like, and then I started doing variations of a theme and making it more complex as I went further along. And then I started carving into the shell and doing cutouts around it. And then I started weaving a great deal with the shell to show it how it goes in and out and through different designs. After I came back from New York City at a show at the Museum of the American Indian, the Haid Foundation, I started thinking about my experiences up there. And one thing I wanted to always try to do with my artwork is to combine the old motifs with things that are very contemporary. So I tried to incorporate those two concepts into one piece. We're showing the traditional design of the Birdman flying over the city or through the city to try to see what the city was like, to learn about it, but then also to come back and to have that experience in his past. As an artist, I'm looking for a direction, and I've gained that direction from my heritage and from nature and those things that are around me. And I've looked into it so hard that I've tried to find a true direction for myself, and I feel like I'm getting a lot of strength from those things from nature, from my heritage. And I think this is what's helping me continue on and try to put all this into shell work and to keep up this work.
Hele mangia hiyo wa hele mangia hiyo wa hele mangia
And I want to thank Jared Moore, our production coordinator here at Muskogee Vision, for putting together that archive, finding it, basically saying, Jason, look at this. We need to show this. This is really neat from back in the day, something very cool. And we want to thank Mr. Scott, his contributions to that video then, so we could show it to you now, the power of archiving from the Inside the Vault series here on Muskogee Vision. We'll see you guys next week.